Hi folks, I'm going to keep this brief. You can support the creation of these videos by becoming a supporter on patreon.com/John D Ruddy, or become a member here on YouTube by clicking join below. My updated Presidents of the United States posters are available at my store on johndruddy.com, going through from Washington all the way up to Trump. This video covers the Gilded Age, well, a little bit before that, basically from the end of the Civil War all the way up to 1912. But within that we've got the Gilded Age, which upon researching is disturbingly familiar with today as millionaires, as they were back then, not billionaires at that point, but millionaires and ever-growing monopoly corporations were controlling the wealth of America. So, let me know in the comments how similar you think it all is. Enjoy! Manny Man Does History. Civil War hero General Ulysses S. Grant campaigned as the Republican candidate against Democrats Horatio Seymour in 1868. Grant decisively won the Electoral College, although the popular vote was a lot closer. He was partially bolstered in the South by newly enfranchised free men in the South, who were now able to vote, much to the dismay of many whites in the South. Texas, Mississippi, and Virginia had not yet formally rejoined the Union in time for the election. This was Nebraska's first election. Grant had sent the army into the South to ensure Reconstruction took place. For the 1872 election, the Democrats tried something a little different. After Grant was unanimously re-nominated as the presidential candidate, some Republicans split and formed the Liberal Republican Party, and they put forward New York Tribune owner Horace Greeley as their candidate, demanding an end to Reconstruction and civil service reform. Democrats decided their best bet was to get behind Greeley and not split the vote against Grant. But Grant won hugely anyway, as he was still very popular. Greeley took the defeat very hard, along with other problems in his life, and he had a breakdown and died weeks after the election. This was before the Electoral College cast their votes, so his 66 electoral votes were divvied up amongst other candidates. Louisiana and Arkansas's electoral votes for Grant were actually invalidated due to allegations of electoral fraud. This election would be the last time in a long time that many states in the South would vote Republican, as it became a Democrat stronghold. Heading towards the 1876 election, James G. Blaine appeared to be the favourite to get the Republican nomination. Blaine's campaign, however, fell flat on its face from the outset, as rumours of corruption and bribery from railroad tycoons stirred, followed up by letters from a Boston clerk claiming to prove it, only for Blaine to seemingly snatch the letters away and never come up with them ever again. Sus much. 1876 would go on to be one of the most controversial elections in American history. Ohio Governor Rutherford B. Hayes was selected as a safe candidate for the Republicans over Blaine, while the Democrats went with the New York Governor Samuel J. Tilden, the only time, as of 2024, two sitting governors competed for the presidency. This was Colorado's first election. The race was insanely close, as Hayes won the Electoral College by a single vote, while Tilden won the popular vote by 250,000. This caused huge uproar, as both sides were accused of electoral fraud, voter intimidation, and black Republicans being blocked from voting. Democrats disputed the validity of votes from Oregon, Louisiana, South Carolina, and Florida, leading to the establishment of the Electoral Commission, made up of members of the House and Senate, as well as Supreme Court justices, to resolve the issue. And they decided the votes would indeed go to Hayes. The Democrats tried to filibuster and delay this ruling as the inauguration day of March 4th drew ever closer. They eventually came to a compromise where Hayes would end Reconstruction in return for Democrats accepting his presidency. White supremacists had lost the Civil War, but they absolutely won Reconstruction, as they swiftly brought in laws and systems to further discriminate black people and keep them in their place, putting up tons of barriers to vote. From then, the Republican Party began to lean away from civil rights and more towards big business. It was during the 1870s that the elephant and the donkey came to symbolize the Republicans and Democrats, based on political cartoons of the time. Hayes did not stand for re-election in 1880. James A. Garfield became the Republican nominee, and Winfield Scott Hancock became the Democratic nominee. They campaigned on Civil War loyalties, and if you look at the electoral map, that is very evident. Trade tariffs and Chinese immigration were also hotly debated at the time. The left-wing Greenback Party emerged for this election, putting forward James B. Weaver to fight against the ever-growing monopolies in America. This also certainly was the era of great big bushy beards. Sadly, Weaver didn't get anywhere, and Garfield and Hancock won 19 states each, with the popular vote separated by just 2,000 people, which is the closest a popular vote has ever been. Although the Electoral College strikes again, and Garfield won 214 electoral votes against Hancock's 115. At least it was more decisive than the last one. This would be the last in a 6-election winning streak for the Republicans. Garfield would be assassinated by a disgruntled Garfield stan only months into his presidency, so Chester A. Arthur became president. Arthur failed to get nominated to run for re-election. Now, Secretary of State James G. Blaine was back, and this time got the chance to run for president for the Republicans. Grover Cleveland became the Democratic nominee. Almost immediately, the old accusations of corruption resurfaced towards Blaine. Blaine, James G. Blaine, the continental liar from the state of Maine. Burn this letter. Many Republicans who strongly opposed corruption were known as mugwumps, which sounds like a character created by Dr. Seuss. The campaigns got very personal as Republicans uncovered that Cleveland had fathered a child up in Buffalo outside of wedlock, and deeper they delved. Blaine hoped he'd swing some Irish Catholic votes his way, as his own mother was Irish Catholic. But then one of his supporters gave a speech calling the Democrats out as the party of rum, Romanism and rebellion, so no Irish Catholic vote for you. He lost the key swing states of New York, New Jersey, Indiana and Connecticut, so Grover Cleveland won the Electoral College and the presidency. Cleveland ran for re-election in 1888, this time going up against Republican Benjamin Harrison, grandson of former very brief President William Henry Harrison. They debated on tariff policy, which was super exciting, with Cleveland wanting to reduce them and help consumers, while Harrison wanted to increase them and protect industrialists and factory workers. Although I doubt the profits would make their way to the workers so much, just saying. Cleveland opposed Civil War pensions, losing many veterans' votes. It was another narrow popular vote, with Cleveland winning by nearly 100,000 people. But Harrison won more states and more electoral votes, so he became president. Cleveland would return for a rematch with Harrison in 1892. Once again, they debated on tariffs, and there was much rejoicing. Yay! Cleveland also opposed the Lodge Bill, a voting rights proposal which was a final remnant of the Republicans' commitment to civil rights. The gold standard was also a hot topic in the 1890s, and whether or not to introduce silver into coins as well, which Cleveland was opposed, fearing inflation. A new agrarian pro-Labour party, the Populist Party, arose with the presidential candidate James B. Weaver. And he gave the other two a run for their money, winning 5 states and 22 electoral votes in the Midwest. Cleveland achieved a much more decisive victory this time, winning 277 electoral votes against Harrison's 145. Grover Cleveland became the first president to serve 2 non-consecutive terms, being both the 22nd and 24th president. This was Washington, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, and North and South Dakota's first election. Cleveland did not run for re-election in 1896, which saw America deep in an economic depression since the Panic of 1893. The wealthy were hoarding their wealth, and the conservative reluctance to allow for silver to enter the currency meant that the average person had no money to spend. Prices were low, but no one had any money. Profits were low and unemployment was high, with workers standing up for their health, safety and fairness amidst a country controlled by monopolistic businessmen. The Democratic Party had been becoming a bit more economically liberal, with more conservative Democrats, known as Bourbon Democrats, losing control of the party. The Democratic nominee was William Jennings Bryan, who went on a crusade of the working man against the rich by introducing silver and getting money back into the hands of working people. Money is made to go around. Sadly, he didn't convince enough people, and William McKinley won the election. This was Utah's first election. The two candidates returned for a rematch in 1900. Bryan continued to push for silver, whereas McKinley was riding high off the back of a victory against Spain in the Spanish-American War, where they gained footholds in Cuba and territory in Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. McKinley won a stronger victory against Bryan in the 1900 election, winning a second term with his vice president, former New York Governor Theodore Roosevelt. McKinley would be assassinated by an anarchist 6 months into his term. From then on, Congress requested the Secret Service provide presidential protection. That was after the third presidential assassination. The third one. Theodore Roosevelt became the youngest ever president of the USA. He would push for a square deal to help the working people of America. He was firm at clamping down against business monopolies and proved a strong diplomat. The Bourbon Democrats gained control of the party again and put forward New York Judge Alton B. Parker, and he lost to a Roosevelt landslide, who became the first president to receive more than 300 electoral votes. Roosevelt had promised not to seek a third term, as was the tradition. So in 1908, he urged his close friend William Howard Taft to run for the Republicans. The Liberals and Progressives had regained control of the Democrats, and they returned once again with William Jennings Bryan pushing back against the big business elites. This was his third time running, but third time was not a charm for Bryan, as Taft won the whole North and 321 electoral votes. The Socialist Party and Prohibition Party ran candidates too, but each only took 1% of the popular vote. The cogs of capitalism were strong. This would be Oklahoma's first election. During his presidency, Taft proved to be very conservative, much to the disliking of Teddy Roosevelt, who challenged his old friend for the presidential candidacy in 1912. Taft won the Republican nomination, so Roosevelt formed the progressive Bull Moose Party and ran as a third-party candidate, pushing for social insurance programs, reducing to 8-hour workdays, and strong federal regulation of the economy. While campaigning in Milwaukee, Roosevelt was shot by a man opposed to a third-term president, later claiming the ghost of McKinley told him to do it. Lucky for Roosevelt, the bullet first had to go through his metal glasses case, along with his 50-page speech, only to lodge in his chest. And confident that the bullet hadn't got to his lungs, Roosevelt actually went on to deliver his speech, opening with, "Friends, I shall ask you to be as quiet as possible. I don't understand whether you fully understand I have just been shot, but it takes more than that to kill a bull moose." That bullet would remain lodged in his chest for the rest of his life. The Democrats put forward New Jersey Governor Woodrow Wilson, who was also pushing for banking reforms, tariff reduction, and better antitrust regulation to fight the monopolies. Eugene V. Debs of the Socialist Party ran again too, claiming the other three candidates, including Roosevelt, were pawns of the capitalist system, that Roosevelt was using the language of socialism, but ultimately maintaining the capitalist status quo. Debs managed to win 6% of the popular vote, but not enough for any electoral votes. This is the most in a popular vote any socialist candidate has gotten in a presidential election. The Republican vote became split between Roosevelt and Taft, which allowed for Wilson to win most of the states and become the first candidate to win over 400 electoral votes. Roosevelt did actually do better than Taft, but this election is a prime example of the major flaw within the Electoral College system, be it either the winner-takes-all approach of most states or a lack of ranked choice voting. It forces it all into two candidates, two parties with little actual choice for voters. Given that Roosevelt, Taft and Debs' combined popular vote share was 56.6% against Wilson's 41.8%, it's possible that if ranked choice voting had been in place, that voters could vote for Taft or Debs first, but then have Roosevelt second. So if Taft didn't get enough to win, his second choice votes could be transferred to Roosevelt. This is all assuming that every Taft voter would want to transfer to Roosevelt and not Wilson, which is much harder to judge, but still, you get the idea. To this day, voting third party for president in America is seen as a wasted vote, which, given the system, in many ways, it is. Ranked choice allows you to vote for who you actually want first, but just in case they don't get in, you can choose a second preference as a safety. And in many ways, the two-vote electoral college thing the founding fathers had in the first couple of elections had an element of ranked choice voting in it. Anyway, off my soapbox for now. This was Arizona and New Mexico's first election, now including all the contiguous United States. Also, fun fact, Taft was the last president to not be clean-shaven. Thanks for watching, folks. Please like, share and subscribe. Sharing, I think, will really help at the moment because the algorithm has been subduing so many of my more recent videos. So please share and tell everybody to go and watch this. It's good, actually. Hot take. Once this series is up to date, I'm going to do a mega cut of them all and intercut that with an updated full version of just the general history of the presidents of the United States. So it's going to be wild. It's going to be a lot. And yes, I am going to do a section on Biden and a little bit on kind of looking to the future of a second Trump presidency. So, please consider supporting me on patreon.com/John D Ruddy. Every little bit helps. Thank you so much to everyone who continues to support me.
Ba-bum.